So here we are talking about one of the most critical and frankly most dreaded aspects of project management. That is figuring out what things will actually cost and whether they are worth doing in the first place. Now, I love how this chapter opens with two brutally honest quotes that probably make every project manager wince a little. So, the first one, if you will read the reference, the first one says, "The method I use to estimate costs is think of a number and double it." And that's from an actual project planner, folks. And honestly, there is more truth to that approach than any of us would like to admit. The second quote is even better. The only people who give reliable estimates are depressed or worse. Well, that comes from a professor of accounting. And while it sounds harsh, there is real wisdom there about the psychology of estimation. But here is the thing. Despite how uncomfortable cost planning makes us, despite how often we get it wrong, we absolutely cannot skip this step. Why? Because as the chapter points out, resources are scarce. We cannot do everything. So we need a way to decide what is worth our time, money, and effort. So today, we are going to dig into the nuts and bolts of building realistic cost estimates, creating compelling business cases, and perhaps most importantly, understanding why even our best estimates often goes sideways. So we will look at real examples, including some spectacular failures that show what happens when cost planning goes wrong. And trust me, by the end of this session, you will have a much better appreciation for why that project planners think of a number and double it approach might actually be more scientific than it sounds. So now, this slide shows us the 4D model, the framework that guides us through the entire project life cycle. And now, notice how cost and benefit planning sits right in the D2 or design 8 phase, specifically chapter 8. So this makes perfect sense because once we have defined what we want to do in D1, we need to figure out what it is going to cost and whether it is worth doing before we move into the detailed design work. You cannot make smart decisions about scope, quality, and stakeholder management without first understanding the financial realities. So here is how we are going to tackle cost and benefit planning today. So first, we will dive into the basics of the cost planning process, understanding the different approaches like ground up versus top down costing, the key elements that make up project costs and various estimation techniques. Then we will move into business case development where we will explore financial appraisal methods like payback analysis and discounted cash flow. And finally, we will look at the challenges for the perceived wisdom. Because here's the reality. Even with all these sophisticated techniques, projects still go massively over budget. We will examine why that happens and what we can do about it. So let us start with the fundamentals of cost planning. This is where the rubber meets the road, where we move from wishful thinking to actual numbers. So cost planning is an iterative process, much like time planning, but with some additional complications. Not only do we have to estimate what activities will cost today, but we also have to account for changes over time. Inflation, currency fluctuations, and shifting material costs. Plus, we need to understand the basic relationship between cost, price, and profit, which depends entirely on the context we are working in. So, are we working with fixed price contracts, cost plus arrangements, target costing systems? Well, each approach changes how we think about and structure our estimates. So here is something fundamental that many people don't think about clearly. The relationship between cost, price, and profit is not fixed. It depends entirely on which variable gets determined first. So let's take a Filipino construction company bidding on a DPWH road project. If it is a fixed price government contract, say 50 million pesos for a 5-kilometer road, then your cost plus profit has to equal that 50 million pesos. So you need to manage your costs to preserve your profit margin. But if you are working on a cost plus arrangement, maybe for a private client building a resort in Palawan where specifications keep changing, you know your costs will be covered plus a percentage for profit. And then there is target costing, which we see with Filipino suppliers to multinational companies. Well, if you are supplying parts to Toyota's plant in Laguna, Toyota sets the target price based on what the market will pay. So they decide their profit margin, and that leaves you with a target cost you absolutely have to hit. So, understanding which scenario you are completely you are in completely changes how you approach your cost planning. So look at your screen right now. It shows you the three different ways to think about these fundamental business relationships. So the first equation we have there, price equals cost plus profit. This is your basic markup approach. So you figure out what something costs to make or do and then add your desired profit margin. So the second equation, that is your cost equals price minus your profit. So it is like what happens when you are working backwards from a known selling price and profit target. And the third, that is your profit equals your price minus cost. So it tells you what you are actually making after all those expenses. Now, let us apply this to our DPWH road project earlier. So in scenario 1, if you are a new contractor trying to establish yourself, you might calculate that the road will cost 40 million pesos in materials, labor, and equipment, then add a 10 million pesos profit margin to bid 50 million pesos. So that is price equals cost plus profit. But here is the reality. DPWH has already set the budget at 50 million peso based on their estimates. So you are actually in scenario 2. Cost equals price minus the profit. So you know the price is 50 million pesos. You want a 5 million profit, which means you absolutely cannot spend more than 45 million on execution. So this forces much tighter cost control. And scenario 3, That is where many contractors find themselves after the fact, discovering their actual profit when they add up all the real costs at project completion. Well, sometimes that number is much smaller than expected, or worse, negative. Okay, so think of cost planning like creating a detailed shopping list before a major grocery run. Except the stakes are much higher and the numbers have more zeros. So this process breaks down into four essential steps. First, you identify all the things you need to buy or do. These are your project elements. For our DPWH road project, this means everything from aggregate and cement to equipment rental and labor costs. So you cannot estimate what you have not identified. Second, you estimate how much each element will cost you. So this is where it gets tricky. Cement prices in Manila might be different from Cebu, and skilled equipment operators command different rates in different regions. And the third, you add these costs together to get your total. Sounds simple, but this is where many people make mistakes by forgetting indirect costs or double counting items. Then the fourth one, this is very crucial. You need to consider the risks that might make costs go up or down. What if the rainy season extends longer than usual? What if steel prices spike due to global supply issues? What if you discover unexpected soil conditions that require additional foundation work? So these risk factors can dramatically impact your final costs, which is why the project planners advise to think of a number and double it. So is it not as crazy as it sounds? So, when it comes to actually putting numbers to your estimates, you have three main approaches, and each has its place depending on your situation. So, the top down estimation starts with a total budget. Maybe your client says, "We have 50 million pesos for this road project." And you divide that among the different work packages. So this approach works well when you are constrained by a fixed budget or when you are doing high-level planning early in a project. Now the next one is the bottom-up estimation. The next one is the bottom-up estimation. It is actually the opposite. You estimate each individual cost element and you add them all up. So for our road project, you had priced out every cubic meter of concrete, every ton of asphalt, every day of equipment rental, and then you sum it all. So this tends to be more accurate, but it requires much more detailed planning upfront. So the third approach, it actually uses past experience or industry standards. So what the chapter calls parametric estimating. So if you have built similar roads before, you might know that rural roads in your region typically costs 8 8 to 12 million pesos per kilometer. So depending on terrain and specifications. So these actually gives you a quick sanity check against your detailed estimates. So the reality is experienced project managers use all three approaches. So you might start with industry benchmarks to get a ballpark figure, do detailed bottom-up estimates for the major components, then use top-down allocation for smaller items. So the key is understanding when each approach is most reliable. So now we move from figuring out what things will cost to answering the bigger question, should we do this project at all? This is where business case development comes in. A business case is essentially your argument for why this project deserves funding over all other competing priorities. So it is not enough to say this road will cost 50 million pesos. You need to demonstrate that spending those 50 million pesos on this particular road will deliver more value than spending it elsewhere. So this is where we get into financial appraisal techniques like payback analysis, discounted cash flow, or internal rate of return. So for our DPWH road project, the benefits might include reduced travel time for local communities, improved access to markets for farmers, increased property values, and reduced vehicle maintenance costs due to better road conditions. But here's the challenge. How do you put a peso value on improved quality of life for rural communities? How do you quantify the economic impact of farmers getting their produce to market 30 minutes faster? These are the kinds of questions that make business case development both critical and complex. So the numbers matter, but so does the story behind the numbers. So think of a business case as your elevator pitch to get funding. You need to make a very compelling argument in a structured way. So this discussion that you see on your slides right now have 5 essential components. So the first one, you explain why the project is needed. So for our road example, maybe the current route floods during monsoon season, cutting off 3 barangays from essential services. So that is your problem statement. Second, you describe both financial and non-financial benefits. Financial might be 2 million peso annually is reduced vehicle maintenance costs and fuel savings. Non-financial could be improved emergency medical access and increased school attendance during rainy season. So third, you estimate the costs. That 50 million pesos we calculated earlier, including all the risk factors we discussed. And fourth, the critical analysis. Do the benefits actually outweigh the costs? This is where techniques like net present value and payback period will help you make an objective comparison. Okay? So finally, you consider risks and alternatives. What if we just improve drainage on the existing road for 50 million pesos instead? What if we wait 2 years when construction costs may go lower? So the bottom line here is decision makers have limited budgets and unlimited demands. So your business case needs to demonstrate why this particular project deserves funding over all other worthy projects competing for the same resources. So now we get to the uncomfortable truth about all these sophisticated cost and benefit planning techniques. So they often don't work as well as we'd like them to. This section challenges the perceived wisdom that rational, objective financial analysis always leads to good project decisions. So let us go back to our DPWH road project. On paper, everything looked solid, so that is 50 million pesos budget. Clear benefits for 3 barangays, positive net present value. But then, reality hits. Maybe the original soil survey missed a section of soft clay that requires expensive deep foundations. So that's adding 8 million pesos. Now, perhaps steel prices jumped 25% due to global supply chain issues. Now, the local government might decide they want the road widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes midway through construction. And suddenly, your 50 million project is approaching to 70 million pesos. Was your original estimate wrong? Well, not necessarily. You might have done everything right. Detailed bottom-up costing, risk analysis, and all the works. But you fell victim to optimism bias, where we naturally underestimate how long things take and how much they cost. So this is especially common in Philippine infrastructure where unexpected challenges are the norm, like unstable soil conditions, right-of-way issues, permit delays, or weather disruptions that stretch our timelines. So this chapter shows that this is not unique to the Philippines. It is actually a global phenomenon. So that challenges the idea that better analysis always lead to better outcomes. Okay, so here is our 4 fundamental problems with traditional project evaluation methods that assume everything can be reduced to financial numbers. So first, some benefits simply cannot be measured in money. So how do you put a peso value on improved patient care or better educational outcomes? Second, long-term strategic benefits often don't show immediate financial returns. So you think about investing in digital infrastructure that enables future innovations. Third, there is optimism bias. We consistently underestimate costs and overestimate benefits. And the fourth one, it is nearly impossible to predict all possible risks and changes over a project's lifetime. So now, let us see how this play out in our DPWH road project. The financial benefits were relatively straightforward to calculate. Reduced travel time, lower vehicle maintenance costs, fuel savings. But what about the social benefits? How do you quantify the value of children being able to get to school during rainy season, or the peace of mind that comes from knowing an ambulance can reach your barangay year-round? So then, there is the strategic aspect. This road may not show strong financial returns in year one, but it could be the catalyst that affects a food processing plant to the area in 5 years, creating hundreds of jobs. So that is impossible to capture in a traditional cost-benefit analysis. And optimism bias? We assumed we assumed normal weather patterns, stable material costs, and no major permit delays. But in the Philippines, those assumptions are almost guaranteed to be wrong. The question is not whether unexpected challenges will arise. It is which ones and how severe they will be. So, here we are at the end of our journey through cost and benefit planning, and I want you to see how beautifully this connects to everything we learned about time planning. You remember the chapter 7 when we helped Sarah and Mike plan their wedding? We broke it down into specific activities: booking the venue, hiring the caterer, arranging flowers, coordinating the photographer. Well, those same activities are exactly what we are costing here in. So in chapter 8, we are not starting from scratch. We are building on what we already know. So when you estimated that the catering setup would take 3 hours with 4 staff members, that time estimates becomes the basis for calculating labor costs. So those 150 invitations you planned to send out, now they become line items in your stationery budget. So those buffer days you built into the timeline because vendors sometimes run late, they help justify why you need extra money set aside for contingencies. So it is the same wedding, the same breakdown structure, the same thinking process. We are just changing the lens from when will this happen to how much will this cost. And most importantly, we are adding that financial crucial question. Is this wedding or is this project worth the investment? And that brings us to the end of chapter 8, the cost and benefit planning. So we have covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of cost estimation to the complexities of building business cases, and finally to understanding why even our best planning efforts sometimes fall short. So the key takeaway is this: cost and benefit planning is not just about crunching numbers. It is about making informed decisions with imperfect information. So whether you are Sarah and Mike deciding how much to spend on their dream wedding, or a government agency evaluating infrastructure investments, the principles remain the same. So remember, those opening quotes about thinking of a number and doubling it, they are not jokes. They are wisdom born from experience. So good cost planning acknowledges uncertainty, builds in contingencies, and recognizes the optimism bias is real. And most importantly, cost planning connects directly to everything else we do in project management. So your work breakdown structure becomes cost breakdown structure. So your time estimates drive your labor costs. Your risk analysis justifies your contingencies. So, as you move forward in your project management journey, do not see cost planning as a separate, intimidating exercise. You have to see it as the natural next step after time planning. So, the bridge between can we do this and should we do this? Okay? So, that is so that's it. I will see you in our next chapter where we continue building your project management toolkit. Bye. See you next time.